Ever wonder what a real launch looks like behind the scenes and not just the polished highlight reel? In this episode, I'm pulling back the curtain on the most recent launch for Anti-Social School and walking you through exactly what worked, what didn't, the honest truth about setting up launch goals and what goal we actually hit, and how every step from emails to bonuses to follow-ups set up you for a sustainable result. So inside this episode, you will walk away with practical takeaways for planning your own launch, real world expectations, we are not sugarcoating here, and a reminder that launch success comes from momentum and not perfection. Plus, I'm taking you behind the scenes on our brand new tool, Layla the Layout Legend, which helps you plan your social without being on social all day long, a true anti-social strategy. And I'm talking about our brand new private podcast, Launch Lessons, which breaks down all the lessons learned, plus tips and tricks you can learn along the way. So you can grab the full series at hollymariehaynes.com/launch lessons. And I would love for you to tell me in the comments what part of this launch recap surprised you the most. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. Welcome back to this week's pep talk. And today I am doing something that I haven't done in a really long time, and that's going through real life launch stats. So we're talking about what worked and what didn't in our very recent last launch of Anti-Social School. And so my goal here is to really pull back the curtains on real stats, like not the filtered version. And to just show you what launching really looks like. For the most part, launching is all me. So I have a copywriter, my good friend Jenny, that helps me behind the scenes. And then I have a website team that makes changes to our pages, but everything else is 100% me. And so I think this is important to share because launching looks different depending on how far along you are in business, what you're doing, what you're selling, what your team looks like. So that's just a little backstory on who I have helping me. But also I want to talk about launch goals and what actually happened with those goals. So to start out, we went into this launch with 3 tiers, a top tier, a mid tier, and a low tier. And that's something that I recommend that you do with anything really that you're putting out in the world. And so the goal is that the high goal really stretches you. That's like your dream scenario. And then the mid goal is more like solid and achievable. And the low goal is like, well, if everything went sideways, like this is the thing that I can actually do and I'm still going to count it as a win. And so the reason why I think it's important to set it up this way is because launches are unpredictable. And so going into any launch, you have to really get your head on straight because I always say you can control your actions, but you absolutely cannot control the outcome. And so it's helpful for me as somebody who wants to always hit the high goal to have multiple benchmarks for success. So I'm not riding this like emotional roller coaster based on this one goal. And the other thing is this goal helps you track what's working and what's not. And you can then, compare it over time. So a little recap of what the Anti-Social School launch looked like if you were not following along. So we have a private podcast called Ditch the Social Drama. It runs all the time. If you are in the private podcast while we are not launching, you either go to a wait list or you can put a deposit down into our class. If you are not in that funnel, then we will talk about that funnel. We'll talk about, hey, you should go listen to this podcast because it does share the framework to our Anti-Social School program. But this time around, because we were doing a live launch, we did a live event. So the live event was called Ditch the Social Drama Live. I took what we talk about in the podcast and I gave it like a 2025 spin. I added in some Q&A. I added in some really cool bonuses, like 25 ways to become more visible in 2025. So when you joined the workshop, you immediately got that. You also got one of our brand new AI assistants, our bots. And that was just a way of me showing like, hey, there's a lot of value here. And even if you don't join Anti-Social School, my thought was between the private podcast and the workshop that I was teaching live, you would get to know me and my methodology and what I taught. And then hopefully some people would join our program. And so we offered the live event. The live event was $22. So this was the first time that we have ever charged for a live workshop. And the reason I did it was actually very strategic. And that was in January, we did another launch to our Crush the Rush Club, and it was free. And I taught a lot. I gave away a lot. I also did a podcast on this podcast that you're listening to after that launch of all the ways you can implement our antisocial strategy. So in my head, I just taught a free workshop. We have this podcast, which I would argue is very educational. We have the Ditch the Social Drama podcast, which I would argue is very educational. And I really wanted people to come to this Ditch the Social Drama live workshop, the paid workshop, if they were truly interested in implementing the strategy. So we hosted the live workshop. Then we had an open house, which I've talked about a lot on this podcast. And you can go back and listen to that episode about why that strategy works. It just allows us to go through and answer questions live, interview students, and you get to see the program. And then I also opened up my calendar for discovery calls. And I will tell you, whenever I share this behind the scenes launch with my clients, I'm like, we're in a season where it took all the steps. Right? And so I think that's just important for me to share. Yes, we had a plan. Yes, we had a strategy. Yes, I was still able to take my girls to dance class and do other things while we were launching, but it took every single step this time. And the outcome is we hit our mid goal, almost top goal. The class was 95% sold out. We were so close. And I was really, really happy with that and grateful for all of our new students, but it took all the steps. It took all the steps, all the follow-ups, and all the relationships built along the way. The cool part was we had, in terms of numbers, so this is what you actually want to know, we had 71 people register for our live event. Now, I'm telling you this because I do not have a large email list. It is not crazy big. I don't have a large social following, and we are running a large business. And so these are like real life numbers. So we had 71 people register for the workshop. It was a mix of paid and free. So we had almost 40 people pay for the workshop, and then the rest came from our communities that already exist. So if you're in the club or you're in our co-op, you get access to the workshop free. So 40 people paid, 71 registered, and then we had 5 of those that upsold to the Pitch Perfect bundle. So when you register for the workshop, we had a tripwire that went to our Pitch Perfect bundle, which was $47. So we made about $800 on the workshop. This is not like a huge moneymaker, but what happened was we had 42% of those people that registered actually came to our workshop live. I will take that number anytime because everyone was so engaged and so excited, and it just felt really good to teach a workshop where everyone was very present and very ready to learn. So I would do this strategy again. I definitely learned a lot from it, and I think those numbers showed that. So then we get into our actual launch. So after the workshop, we did a full open house. And what our open house looks like is at the beginning, I interview current students, and I do it like podcast style where I ask 4 or 5 students 3 to 4 questions and just let them openly share their experience of antisocial school. So we ran the open house with current students, and then I give a behind the scenes of what the program looks like. So if you're interested, you can see the behind the scenes because people get a little bit nervous and they're like, I don't know what to ask. And, this sort of takes the pressure off. It puts the pressure on me, which is fine. And then I go ahead and answer frequently asked questions. I know what you're going to ask. I know you're going to ask about the price. I know you're going to ask about the time. I know you're going to ask about, well, what will I actually get from this? And so I answer all those questions in the open house, and then I open it up for anyone to ask questions. Every single time we have done an open house, I have gotten a new student. So even if 2 people came to the open house, I would 1,000% do this open house strategy. It has worked, knock on wood, every single time. So if you look at sort of how our sales went, I would say 50% of our new students joined in the first 2 days, either after the workshop, where there was an extra bonus if you joined within 24 hours, or after the open house. So 50% of our students joined at the beginning. And then we went into what I call mid-cart slump. And it was a slump this time. Like it was crickets in the middle. It was obviously over a weekend. We strategically planned to run our launches usually midweek to midweek because we know the mid-cart slump will fall over the weekend. But it was really, really quiet. We did have a couple of alumni join over the weekend. These are students who are opting in to retake the program because they loved it so much, which is always such a great surprise for me. But I love when students come back. And then the rest of our students joined on the last day, and that was after discovery calls. So we had multiple discovery calls. Our discovery calls, every single discovery call converted except one. I told you I was going to give you real life stats, and that one person is actually sitting in my inbox right now asking questions. So I would argue opening up your calendar is a really great launch strategy, especially during this season where it is taking all of the steps. And just for fun behind the scenes, we also had a new club member join because they weren't quite ready for antisocial school, but were ready for our Crush the Rush club. So that's what our stats looked like. And again, those were the steps that we went through. What worked and what didn't. So the live event strategy paired with the private podcast worked really well because that's where most of our sales came from. And so it led to immediate conversions. I would 1,000% do it charged again, like have it a paid workshop. And I would also add on the Pitch Perfect bundle or some sort of tripwire on the other end. So that just means like when you pay for the free thing or the paid workshop that you're doing on the back end, there's like, hey, you can add this on for $47. And a lot of people took me up on that, and they should because it's a great bundle. And so it was an easy add-on and extra revenue. It didn't require any more work on my part. The other thing that worked well was obviously opening our calendar. I think we are in a season, and I have shared this, where people want high touch. They're craving to get to know you as a person, and it's where your qualified leads are going to show up. So open your calendar. You could be super protective of your time, but do it in a way that works for both your audience and you. During our mid-cart slump, we sent out it was actually St. Patrick's Day. So we sent out a St. Patrick's Day bonus email, and it was like, hey, if you missed the bonus kind of thing. But I only sent it to people that responded to the workshop. The reason I'm sharing this is we sent segmented emails specifically to those that RSVP'd to the workshop and those that didn't. So depending what path you chose, you might have gotten a different email, because I know if you paid for a workshop, you're going to be a little bit more interested than somebody that didn't. And then last but not least, I shared this, is alumni love. Like, return students are gold, so don't forget them. We talk about the 80-20 rule all the time, but think about your programs, and do you have an alumni option? Do you have a graduation program? What does that look like for you? Because every single time that we've taught antisocial school, we've always had people come back, and it's really fun to be able to have them in the community and be able to treat them to joining maybe at a different price point or with a different option. So what didn't work was, the weekend's lull. I will say that this is pretty normal, and I did plan our mid-cart slump over the weekend because I knew that it was not only a busy time for us, but also a busy time for everyone else. So the mid-cart lull was there, definitely. We had a couple of deposits that ghosted. And so let me explain what this is. So if you're in our funnel, before antisocial school is open, you can put down a deposit, and the deposit gets you access to things early. And then at a certain time, you have to actually put down the rest of the money to join antisocial school. And so the deposit model just has not worked great for us. I'm not sure why. I think it's a great model, the way that we have it set up, but we had some people that just walked away. So that means they put down a deposit and then they decided that they didn't want to join antisocial school. So my lessons learned was deposit does not always equal done deal. So you can't count on that. I think, what else didn't work? I accidentally sent 2 emails in one day within an hour apart. And so I just needed to personally give myself more time to schedule emails, because there's a lot of emails going on. We didn't really use a ton of social. I think that probably tracks with anti-social school, I leaned into stories a little bit more, but I didn't have a ton of social posts. None of our clients came from social. They all came from referrals or some sort of funnel where that relationship was being built. So I think I would go back and just take a little bit more time to space out our emails a little bit differently. And then, we didn't hit our stretch goal. That's okay. Conversion goals are guides, not judgments. And so these are just things that I think through at the end of every launch when I look at like what worked well, what didn't work well. If I'm being really honest, I think the Ditch the Social Drama live workshop was a little bit too long. It was 90 minutes. I feel like everyone was like in it to win it for the first hour, but the last half hour was not as much engagement. So those are my lessons learned. A key takeaway for this is take all your lessons learned, what worked well, what didn't, put it in a Google Doc and save it for the next time that you launch. So we have all these stats in a Google Doc. I have all of my notes of like what worked well, what didn't work well, what I would do differently. So the next time we launch, I can pull that up and have all of that. We also save all of our emails. We save all the open rates, all the click rates, so I can see exactly what to do different next time without having to like go through the whole thing again, especially if you do it like 3 to 6 months later. A couple key takeaways if you're like, okay, I want to know like what were the key takeaways that you had so that you can apply them to your launch. I personally think the live launch strategy still works when it's very structured, intentional, and solves a clear problem. I 1,000% recommend that you launch at least once a year, but I would say twice a year or once a quarter. That's usually our goal because it helps you get so much cleaned up. It helps you solve some of your back end problems, and it just really has worked well for us. But also, I think I learned so much, my community learned so much, and I usually get new followers from any sort of launch. Always have a follow-up plan. So follow-up plan for me means re-engagement. So segmenting your list and re-engaging those that are really interested, opening up your calendar, thinking through bonuses at different times, and then also having a downsell. So our downsell to Anti-Social School was one of our bots that strategically helps you create a 3, 6, or 9 grid layout. So if you're not ready for Anti-Social School, but you want your social to act a little bit different for you, this was a great downsell. I would totally do that again. And then, expect the unexpected. You need to have thick skin and flexible plans. And you have to be in the launch for the long haul. It was a 10-day open cart for us, which I would definitely do again, given the season. It's a long period. And so launches are layered. It's not like a put it out there and expect people to take action. It's put it out there and talk about it and talk about why, right? People care less about the features and more about the outcome that they're going to get, but they also need to know and like and trust you. So you can't put something in your stories 5 times and expect just any old person to buy at this point in time. I mean, that's my personal advice. There's got to be some strategy behind it and you have to stand out. And so I feel like this model has really helped me personally stand out, but it's also a strategy that I can follow and like check the steps off. And then tracking matters because I knew what was working because we tracked it daily. We tracked emails daily. We tracked when calls were happening, and it wasn't fancy. It was just in a Google Doc, but I knew what was happening. My family knew what was happening so they could help me with my mindset of staying on track. My team knew what was happening so we could adjust along the way. So if you are in the middle of launching or planning one, just know that all of this is normal. Hopefully you can learn a little bit from our lessons learned and also the highs and lows and all the weird things in between. But the best part of this launch, I personally think, was I created a new offer, and that was what I mentioned, our new AI assistant. Her name is Layla the Layout Legend, and she's a brand new bot that helps you plan and visualize your 3, 6, and 9 grid. So if you think about your Instagram and you've got like the 3 pinned post at the top, so you can grab that in the show notes if you think that that will help you. And obviously you can still go back and listen to Ditch the Social Drama, which is hollymariehaynes.com/social. You can also listen to this podcast because we've got a whole series that talks about what we did and how we're building without relying on social media. So I hope that you are excited about what worked in our launch. And also just, a reminder that launches are not linear. So there are highs and lows and weird days and slow days and surprise wins. And I think tracking it and sharing it and being a real person is what has helped me the most, because most people don't have fancy big teams and launches. Most people are doing it very similar to what we're doing. So if you've got something to launch soon, or you've launched before and it felt like a mess, you don't have to wing it again, because if you missed it at the beginning, we have launched a brand new private podcast. It is called Launch Lessons, and it's a behind the scenes strategy, mindset, and step-by-step guide that I wish someone would have handed me before we started launching. And so it's free, it's easy to binge, and it's really designed to help you launch smarter, not louder, right? Go to hollymariehaines.com/launch lessons to start listening. So this episode is filled with lessons learned, a lot of tools that you can use. And, if this episode gave you a little insight or just made you feel less alone in the wild world of launching, I would love for you to share it. Shoot me a DM and let me know what resonated with you most. And just remember that you've got this, right? Let's keep building sustainably and launch like the CEO that you already are.